The Suitcase Deadlift, one of the most underrated unilateral deadlift variations to build grip strength, balance asymmetries, and build all-around core, glute, and back strength. Step 1, we're gonna take a stance that's similar to our conventional deadlift stance. I like to go about hip width. Yours might vary a little bit depending on what you find most comfortable. I also like to point the toes out just slightly so I risk any kind of knee valgus. Step 2, we're gonna hinge back, setting that back, maintain that nice neutral torso. So similar to the deadlift, nice big hinge back. We're gonna focus on really maintaining that strong angle. One thing to note with the Suitcase Deadlift, there is gonna be a little bit more flexion as the implement is lower. The dumbbell, it's gonna be even lower than the kettlebell. The kettlebell is gonna be somewhat similar to a barbell, but again, it's gonna be a little bit more forward flexion of the shin angle. That's okay, just as long as we're still hinging properly and pushing those hips back, maintaining that nice neutral torso. So we have our stance, we have our hinge. Step 3 is packing the lat. So similar to the barbell deadlift, how we're gonna pull those scaps back into the back pockets and maintain that nice upper back tightness, that's gonna be the same case for the Suitcase Deadlift. It's even more pertinent now because we're only lifting on one side to really maintain that nice upper back tightness. Step 4 is gonna be the belly breath and the brace. This is gonna help us, 1, limit any kind of dipping with the one side, and 2, keep the hips aligned so we're not coming up one-sided and shooting up that left hip, which is the countering hip on the movement. Nice strong extension at the top, glutes are tight, my lat is nice and tight, we're not having any kind of variance forward. We're gonna hinge back properly and place that kettlebell right back in the same place we picked it up from. All right, so let's talk benefits of the Suitcase Deadlift. As a strength coach, there are 4 reasons I like to program this movement. And number 1 is for grip strength. So grip is a limiting factor in strength sports. And if your grip is lacking, whether it be overall or on one side, this movement is a great job to highlight which side is lacking or just to build overall grip strength because it's unilateral. You can perform it at high reps or you can load it and do holds, carries, etc. So it's great for grip strength. Number 2 is teaching hinge mechanics. So if you're brand new to the deadlift, the hinge can be kind of troublesome at times, especially when really trying to maintain that nice neutral torso. So this movement's also awesome for maintaining that nice even hip level and the hinge, because if you're not hinging correctly, you're gonna really feel it with this movement, I guarantee it. You're gonna feel one hip hiking up, you might be pulling out with your torso flexed forward. Either way, this is a great movement to kind of teach that hinge, and also it can be modified to be low or high depending on your mobility and your fitness level. Number 3 is the overall muscular development. So this movement's gonna be great for all the posterior chain muscles similar to the deadlift, but it's also really great for the core. This is an anti-bending movement, so it's gonna really strengthen the rectus abdominis and obliques to really maintain that nice neutral torso. Your body's gonna basically fight itself to not fall forward and over for that matter. So think about when you're carrying a suitcase through the airport and you're walking, I'm guessing that you probably have obliques that are on fire. This movement is basically training you to do that, but be better at it and stronger. My 4th benefit is the carryover to the regular deadlift. So this is a unilateral movement, so it's not gonna directly carry over to the barbell deadlift, but teaching the mechanics and the movement will. So maintaining that nice upper back tightness, and this is gonna be really tough to do. And if you're lacking at all in the barbell deadlift, clean pull, or any kind of pulling with the barbell where you're kind of pulling forward, or you feel like your lats are becoming disengaged, this movement's gonna highlight that like crazy. You're gonna feel your arm coming forward, you're gonna feel like the barbell, kettlebell, or dumbbell is out of placement, and this movement is gonna be a great way to kind of teach you at the bottom how to pull back and maintain that throughout the full movement. So those are my 4 big benefits. There are a few more that come along with this movement, but in terms of overall strength and performance and conditioning, those are my big 4. All right, so we talked correct form. Now let's quickly discuss what can go wrong with the Suitcase Deadlift. Let's start down at the ground. So when we're picking up this movement, if we notice that the knee is coming in, that could be a reflection of our stance. So 2 quick tips are, number 1, make sure that your toes are either forward or slightly out. And number 2, really grip the floor in that tripod position. So grip the floor with the full foot, and that should help you track that knee a little bit better. Another thing that can go wrong is your hinge. So obviously in any other kind of deadlift variation, if your hips are shooting up too quickly, then you're not hinging properly. So it should all look synonymous. And if you're noticing any kind of hip variance here and you notice that the torso is then lagging and finishing the movement, that's gonna be something to avoid. And the final thing to note, and probably the biggest with this movement, is the upper back tightness. So we don't have a nice barbell to really pull back and check by pulling into us with this movement, it's on the side. So that means our upper back is gonna have to be extremely tight to maintain its form. If you notice that you're picking up this and it's coming forward, that's a good sign to me that your lat's not engaged and your shoulder blade isn't put in the back pocket. So something to avoid is obviously not packing the upper back and making sure you have that nice neutral torso. Those are 3 things to avoid with the suitcase deadlift. So one of the great things that comes along with the suitcase deadlift is that it can be performed in many ways. As long as you have a kettlebell, dumbbell, or barbell available, this makes it great for anyone traveling or in a gym with limited equipment. So now let's talk about a couple of the variations. The first variation is the dumbbell. So this implement's gonna sit a little bit lower. We're gonna think about maintaining that same form we talked about in the first part of this video. The one difference that I'm gonna say to pay attention to is that there's gonna be a little bit more flexion of the shin forward and a bigger hinge because we do have to sit a little bit lower to pick it up. This is gonna feel more like a leg movement than almost a deadlift variation, and that's totally okay. Again, hip hinge is key here, and so are the packed lats. All right, so let's say mobility is an issue for you, or you just don't find it very comfortable picking up the dumbbell off the floor. You can slide a plate right under that dumbbell. Generally a 45 to a 55-pound bumper plate will give you the similar effect to what a kettlebell or barbell will feel like. And again, similar way and form here. Nice big breath, pulling those lats back. So one thing to note about this variation is that if you're performing it incorrectly, this dumbbell is gonna probably fall off the back or front of that plate, and that's a good way to kind of track if you're hinging properly and maintaining that same kind of bar path. So the last variation we'll talk about is the barbell. So why would you perform this variation? Well, for starters and above all else, this movement is great for grip strength. If you're really trying to build the grip, this is an awesome movement because one, it can be thrown at the end of a workout as an accessory. It can even be bumped up a little bit higher in the workout if you want to load it a little bit heavier. And you can also make it into a carry if you feel like walking with it too, to make it a suitcase carry. So one tip I will give on this is that find a barbell with knurling in the middle, and also pay attention to the barbell's leverage. So if it's dipping forward or back, there's a good chance that 1, your grip's lacking, 2, your hinge is off and you're not maintaining that nice tight upper back, or 3, maybe it's just too heavy and you need to scale back. So similar to we would in all the other variations, maintain that nice tight upper back, the barbell sitting nice and even in my hand, hinge properly, same placement. Those are 3 great variations to perform for the suitcase deadlift. All right, programming the suitcase deadlift. Let's talk about 2 main ways to use this in your workouts. Number 1 is to plug them after your pulling days. So any kind of deadlift day or movement day where you're doing a lot of, like, let's say bent over rows as your main compound. This is a good movement to put right after, and you can load them up a little bit heavier if your goal is grip strength, posterior train strength, and also building up a strong core. Why do it on this day? Well, for starters, you've already been doing a bunch of hinge movements, so my guess is that your body's gonna be already warmed up and kind of feeling that movement, so it's gonna be already kind of ingrained. And number 2, if you're already doing pulling movements, then there's a good chance that your grip's already gonna be taxed, and this could be a good way to really help push and strengthen that grip a little bit further than you would with your normal barbell compounds. So my advice, stick between like 6 to 10 reps. You can load them a little bit heavier. If your goal is purely grip, you can do holds at the top and you can perform them with the barbell. If you're a little bit newer to the deadlift and you wanna kind of just ingrain the mechanics, go a little bit higher reps, so 8 to 12, 15 reps generally is best. You can stick a little bit lighter, and I would recommend going either a dumbbell on a plate, or a kettlebell. The final way you can use these is as a final finisher movement. So putting them all the way at the end of a workout, similar to you would with a lot of core movements. You can perform them high rep with lower weight, and 1, it'll help you really ingrain those hip hinge mechanics for your deadlifts or any kind of pulling movements, but also it's a great core movement. So since it's anti-rotation and it's anti-side bending, it's gonna really build those obliques and core. So putting them at the end for a higher rep sets for let's say 10 to 15 reps for 3 to 4 sets, that's a great way to really get the most bang for your buck out of this while building up grip strength and hinge mechanics. So those are 2 ways to kind of include these into your workout. Obviously, there are more ways to do so depending on your goals and fitness level, but those are just 2 examples of how you could use them. If you want to read more about the suitcase deadlift, make sure to Google BarBend and suitcase deadlift.